Hello, and welcome to the Elevate Entrepreneur, where we decode the success of some of the greatest entrepreneurs that I've met, that I know, that I trust. These individuals have not only built their business up, but they've also impacted lives for the better. Here you will learn not only how to grow your business, but also inspire you to want to be just a little bit better. I'm your host, Raylan Davis. My entire intention is to remove obstacles and excuses as to why people can't realize they deserve more. With that being said, let's jump into this week's episode. Stay motivated, stay elevated. Today, I'm joined by Karl, who is the founder and CEO of Revalancer. I'm going to screw that up, Karl, and I just asked you how to say it. One of the things that I think I'm most fascinated about this conversation we're going to have today, Karl, is I'm sure you've been keeping up with how many people have been losing their jobs lately. Like layoffs have been going on like crazy lately, big tech. And so why do you come into play there? Well, it's because of the fact that, look, I mean, if you get laid off from a job, it's a really good opportunity to become a freelancer. Maybe. Again, maybe. But before we kind of jump into that, though, Karl, let's start with like the basics, right? Like, how did you get to this point where you became a founder? I read a little bit about your story. I know you sold the company, I think, at 16 years old, which is kind of nuts. And then, turn around and now here you are as the founder of a new company. So tell me a little bit about your background and what got you to this place.
Yeah, sure. Well, thanks very much for having me on, first of all. But a bit about my background. I started being interested in making money online at around age 13 or 14. I kind of realized that I wanted to work for myself. I don't know why, but after I made this realization, I started completely ignoring school and started learning, how to build different websites, how to freelance on various different platforms. And just trying to make money online. In some, I remember when I made my first $100 online at the age of 13 or so. I was absolutely jumping through the roof, thinking I'd made it. Now I realize how much.
13, that's a lot of money, dude.
Oh yeah, I was very, very pleased, but it's funny looking back at that now. But so I always kind of had this calling of wanting to work for myself. It's something that always, I kind of spent a lot of time doing in my spare time. So I went from, doing various different projects to freelancing to running an agency to then starting a tech startup, which, I run today.
So after you did your first couple iterations, right, and you're, again, freelancing, it sounds like you're doing websites, all that kind of stuff. What made you decide to start like a big-ass company? Like, how many employees do you have currently right now with Revalancer?
We're a team of 7 at the moment.
Okay, so you still relatively tight-knit, which is good. But what was that journey for you going from freelancer on that hustle mentality, solo kind of style, to now you're managing a team? Like there had to have been some growth periods there and some things you had to learn on how to do that, I would imagine.
Absolutely. I've always had quite high, like large ambitions, and my ambition with Revalancer is to completely transform the freelancing space, because I think in a lot of ways it's outdated and freelancers just aren't treated very fairly, and because of that, clients are massively losing out as well. So I think I always had this ambition of kind of making the freelancing space better. And then, having a larger team, having a growing company is a means to an end, because I certainly can't do that just by myself, actually have a serious impact on the industry just by myself. So I have to surround myself with very talented people who can help, achieve that goal.
Yeah. So you mentioned obviously freelancers, like, I kind of hear this thing with freelancers. You mentioned obviously, freelancers kind of selling themselves short, I think is another way of wording it, right? Like not looking out for themselves. So what is some of the pitfalls or the mistakes that freelancers make today? Because again, I've met quite a few freelancers, and this is weird kind of like growth that you go through. Like for me, I work with coaches predominantly, like online coaches. And so usually there's a period of freelancing, then those freelancers turn into coaches, and that's usually when I see them. What's interesting, though, is there's been this new thing I've been noticing where it's like, no, I'm just going to stay at the freelancer route because they enjoy just doing the work, getting it done, and then being done with it, right? So I guess my question would be, what are some things that freelancers are struggling with today? And I guess, obviously, how does your company kind of help them with that?
Yeah, sure. So I mean, I think that a lot of the issues caused in the industry are caused by large freelancing platforms. So it's not even the fault of the freelancers really. So for example, large freelancing platforms will take a 20% plus commission fee on any work done. So now considering if I'm paying you say $1,000 and you only get 800, am I to expect $1,000 worth of service or $800?
Hmm.
So it's tricky. There isn't really a right answer because that commission fee shouldn't be that huge, or in my opinion, even exist in the first place. Especially on repeat transactions. So basically, what we do differently is we don't take a commission fee and we let people speak outside of the platform, which is another thing that freelancers who acquire clients on large freelancing platforms currently have to keep that relationship with the client on the given platform. They cannot video call or speak outside of the platform in any way.
Yeah,
So
which is
yeah.
super weird, and that's why I didn't really like. It's the weird part. 'Cause I've met somebody who's phenomenal who does like my blog writing for the podcast. Actually, I met her through Fiverr, and there's this weird thing. I got annoyed because I was like, "Hey, I just want to plug you into what we do, so that way when you see the new podcast, you can write. You don't need to tell like I don't have to go into Fiverr every 2 minutes to do whatever." And so it was funny because I didn't know that you can't communicate like outside of Fiverr. And so I sent her an email and I was like, "Hey, just communicate with me." And so she sent me a Word document through Fiverr and it said like, open for your thing. And so I clicked on it and then it was like in the Word doc was like, "Hey, go ahead and email me here, da da da." And I was like, that's like a ransom note. Like it felt like, "Hey, I'm in help me." You know what I mean? It was just the weirdest thing. But for me, it's like the goal of these platforms should, like, for me as a entrepreneur, all of my people are independent contractors, people that work for me. And when we go and we look for freelancer, which is project based, or let's just say there's like one task I want them to do all the time, it is a pain in the ass to find them through Fiverr and have to communicate through, and not just Fiverr, like all these other platforms. And so I really like the idea of, again, giving the flexibility to the freelancer. Because, again, my point is the goal should be find them on Fiverr and then embed them in your system and you're done. Like, now that I found that woman who does a really good job, she's embedded. Like, I don't need to go back to Fiverr because I have her. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely, and that is the way it should work. But the issue is Fiverr doesn't then get to take 20% of all of your payments moving
Hmm.
forward. So that's why it doesn't work for them,
Yeah.
and that's why they try and block that. But ultimately, I think that it's time to switch their business model up because that's not something that works well in the modern day.
So then how do you guys make money as a company then if you're not doing commissions?
We have a subscription tier. It's optional, so it's freemium, but you can pay a small amount monthly, which means you have access to additional tools. You can send more kind of bids to clients and that kind of thing. So you're kind of paying for access to additional tools and services to help you get more clients. But once you've established relationships with those clients, we don't want to get in the middle of that and make your life difficult by not allowing you to speak outside of the platform and just put roadblocks in your way.
Yeah. No, I really like the freemium model in general, even just like the lower, like even what like Elon's doing with Twitter, right? $8, $11, whatever it is. And just so you could have just a little more kind of, going for you. I think too, what are your thoughts on like, on the freelancing? Do you feel like freelancing is going to like kind of explode again because of all these layoffs? And in general, it seems like freelancing is becoming more and more popular in general. And because of that, the other side of what you do, which is cool, is you're helping the clients connect to the freelancers. I think more and more you're going to see a world where, like for me, like I have a podcasting agency, for example. I don't have to necessarily have all employees. Like I have a core group of employees, like 4 of them. The rest of them could be freelancers. You know what I mean? Assuming they get their shit done. My only concern with freelancers is they sometimes, the ones that I've met, sometimes they miss deadlines. Like they're usually creative, and so they take fucking forever to communicate sometimes. So it's frustrating. But anyway, if you had a good system, I feel like you could get away with just having all freelancers. Like you don't necessarily need to hire employees.
Yes, I mean, certainly I think you can, and I do think that freelancing is very much going to explode. I saw a stat recently that projected that more than half of the US workforce will be freelancers by 2027. And also, in addition to that, there are 1.56 billion
Oh shit.
freelancers in the world, which is a third of the global workforce already today. So things are definitely moving in that direction.
You said more than half would be considered freelancers?
Yes, in the next 4 years in the US.
Jesus. Yeah, because again, if you look at the even the age gaps, right? No, like millennials now, Gen Z, Gen Z. A lot of people are just getting tired of working in these corporate places. Here's my concern. I want to hear your thoughts on this. My concern about the skipping of the corporate experience is almost to a detriment. Like I look at my corporate experience as an apprenticeship. I learned a lot, what to do, what not to do, and on the dime of the corporation, right? I screwed a lot up, and I didn't have to pay for nothing, right? They screwed up their stuff. But I've been meeting entrepreneurs and coaches predominantly, and again, some freelancers that I've met, that because they skipped that corporate world, that grind, there's so many basics to business that they miss. And so I'm kind of curious on what your thoughts are. What about because you had this journey too, where you sound like, from 13 on, like you were already becoming a freelancer. Is there a detriment to these freelancers that completely skip the corporate phase? And again, what I consider to be like their apprenticeship.
I wouldn't say so necessarily. I think it could be an issue, but it's only an issue if you let it be an issue. I mean, I think one big advantage that I think I have in terms of employing people is the fact that I have never had a job myself. And obviously that's in many ways you could argue that's a disadvantage because I don't sort of know what I'm talking about. But then again, on the other hand, the reason I've never had a job is because I think I would make a terrible employee. And the reason I'd make a terrible employee is because my standard of a boss, my standards would be so very high of what I would expect to be satisfied in that workplace. So I wouldn't want to put anyone else through, that kind of experience of working for someone terrible. So I hold myself to the standard of, where I would be happy working for myself if I were a different person.
Mm-hmm.
So, it means that, and also the way that I sort of think about things, like, for example, if somebody is just having a bit of a rough day and they need to take the afternoon off. I don't care about them making hours up. I don't care about necessarily even like, reporting that to payroll or whatever else. Because ultimately I know that if I take good care of the people who work for me, then ultimately they're going to go above and beyond, not out of fear or anything, but because they enjoy their work and they feel valued, as human beings outside of just, like a cog in the machine. And I think that if I were to perhaps have more of a corporate background working for other people, maybe I wouldn't see things that way. So I think, certainly it can teach you things, but maybe it can teach you the wrong things too. And sometimes I think it's better to start from a clean slate and then kind of figure it out for yourself. So I think, yeah, it could be good, could be bad. It's whatever you make of it.
No, I think you make a great point in that, like, what you're saying is you're not developing any bad habits, right? Like, for me, some of the things I had to think about, right? It was even too, like, how I manage my team. And, I probably have some bad habits from the old corporate days of like, hey, you got to report this. Here's when all these things. But yeah, I think it probably just doesn't really matter. But I think the biggest thing that I'm noticing with freelancers is, and I think this is where, again, your platform helps, is inability to market oneself, right? Like, I think the cool thing I like about, like, I saw somebody on Twitter the other day, it was like, I had commented or made a tweet about the layoffs. I said, hey, if you've been recently laid off, maybe consider stopping the spiral or stopping the kind of self-fulfilling prophecy of you go get another job, and then in 6 months, maybe a year, maybe a couple of years, you get laid off again, and then you got to go find it. Maybe you should stop that and become a freelancer, a coach, or something, right? You have a skill that's worthy. And this woman commented back and said, well, it's hard when you don't have money and you don't have this, and fair, fair. But I think part of the thing that I said to her was, again, I didn't know about Revalancer yet, so apologies. But I said, hey, look, go to Fiverr. Like, is it the best? Maybe not. But at least they do the marketing for you. You know what I mean? Like, they can kind of connect you to someone. At least you're going to have some visibility as a place to start. So I think, is it fair to say a platform like yours, if you struggle with marketing yourself, if you struggle with, sales or whatever, joining, a company like yours as a freelancer would be a really, really good way to start their entrepreneur or like their freelancing journey.
Well, I mean, yeah, I think freelancing platforms, even the ones like Fiverr, absolutely still can do a lot. But I think it's as you scale and as you start to have a few clients, that's when platform like Fiverr can be a bit of a detriment, with having client relationships outside of the platform. But myself got started on Fiverr back in 2014, so I freelanced on there. I made for the time, plenty of money for the age I was, certainly. Um, but then I kind of grew out of it, and started approaching clients directly. But at that point, I already had a portfolio. I already had a track record, testimonials, that kind of stuff. So I think it's a good, platforms like that in general are a good starting point. But the great thing about Revalancer is you can use it as a starting point, but also you can still use it as you scale, because you can speak with clients outside of the platform. We're not gonna try and crack down on that like other platforms do.
Yeah. So do you have a favorite platform that you like for freelancers when it comes to social media and marketing their services? Like what platform did you use when you started to market yourself as a freelancer and to attract clients?
I did a bunch of different things. I remember that Twitter DMs actually worked quite well. Like I would sort of go and look for companies that have maybe no website, or not a great website, and just send them a Twitter DM and do that for like a couple hours every day. And I got quite a few clients that way, actually. But this was many years ago, so I don't know if it'll still work as well today. But you may as well try. I'd say like sort of contacting companies via email works well as well, but with the big caveat of you have to be very creative in how you write your
Hmm.
cold email, because people get a lot of cold emails. Businesses get a lot of cold emails, probably from agencies and other freelancers trying to offer the same services you do. So you have to be very creative in how you do that and kind of find those opportunities. But I'd say, yeah, you just kind of have to hustle. You have to reach out, trial and error. Don't kind of spend 6 hours trying to write the perfect email. Just put something, kind of scrappy together, put a couple of variations together, send them, see which one, like gets the highest open rate, which one has the highest response rate, and then sort of keep refining that one. So yeah, I mean, it's basically you just have to put in the legwork at the beginning.
Yeah, but for you, you would say like I would imagine too if you're like a writing freelancer, then you could do something like Twitter because obviously it's like highlighting your skill set obviously as a writer. Because like for us, we have I would consider him a freelancer that we're working with through our academy, and that was it. I told him I'm like, dude, like yes, you can exist on Instagram, but like if you're a writer and you're a freelance writer, be on Twitter because like people can see your writing and go, I would love to work with this guy. Like, and it's funny because some people I think miss this and they go, well, everyone's on Instagram, so I have to be over on Instagram. And it's like, yeah, maybe, but also listen, LinkedIn's really good. Again, if you're a writer, but if you're like more graphic design, that kind of stuff, yeah, Instagram because the visuals, right? Like that makes sense. And I think it's like you got to stop and look at what is your skill set, and then what is the platform that best highlights that skill set. Is that fair?
Yes, absolutely. But I think you also have to think about where clients are likely to spend time online. Because, for example, if you join, let's say, Behance, which is a great website for showing off your graphic design portfolio, the chances of a client in need of graphic design paying for an Adobe membership to sort of be on that website, I'd say, is very low.
Yeah.
So yeah, but absolutely. I mean, there. Another thing for writers is Medium. That's fantastic. You can kind of publish
Hmm.
articles on there. Twitter, as you mentioned, of course, is fantastic as well. And then yeah, there are a bunch of more visual ones as well. YouTube, if you do anything with media, audio or video. So yeah, I'd say it's still very important to get your content out there as much as possible.
Are you seeing, Carl, like anything, especially because you probably had tons of data on this, given your website, but is there one or more different freelance opportunities that are super popular right now that people really, really need? Like out of all the freelancing, whether it's graphic design, writing, whatever, is there one or more or a few that like are super in demand right now that maybe again if you're a freelancer and you're thinking, hey, what do I start with? They could start there.
I mean, the demand generally has gone up across the board. I think our data set is going to be a bit skewed because we specialize mainly in graphic design, web development, marketing, and media, and and
Hmm.
those are the categories I'd also mention for where the most demand is. But they're also the ones that we kind of push the most. So it's a self-fulfilling prophecy with those kind of freelancers and those kind of client projects coming onto the platform. Um, but I would say probably best to try and like rather than focusing like obviously it's very important that there is a level of demand, but definitely important to consider the level of competition too, because like for example there's
Hmm.
a huge amount of demand for say graphic design, but I mean I'm not trying to play down graphic design, but some clients would be happy with somebody who has done a basic Photoshop course and puts together something kind of scrappy for $100 or something, and they'd be perfectly happy with that
Yeah.
because they don't know what they don't know how to appreciate good design kind of thing. So there's a lower barrier to entry is essentially what I'm trying to say. So I'd say um, try and find something where there's maybe a higher barrier to entry that you can kind of specialize in, and then where there's demand you'll face a lot less competition in getting those client projects on board. So if that's for example a niche like let's say web development with a very specific kind of technology, or there are lots of different things you could do, but definitely something where there isn't so much supply but still plenty of demand.
Is there do you have like a freelancer in mind? And by the way, you can use yourself too, but like paint me like the dream outcome of a freelancer. Like somebody gets started, what is something they can look forward to? Like for me, for example, when I first got started as a coach, I had a coach slash consultant. I had a mentor that I knew that was doing like $1 million deals with companies. And I was like, "Oh, you can make that much as a consultant?" Like it just didn't. It was like I couldn't even fathom it. And then that's what kind of inspired me to go, "Oh, you know what? Like I could do that too." Because again, what he was teaching, I was like, "Oh, I could do that in my sleep." And then it became this thing of like, "Oh, I could do this too." So, is there any stories you have about freelancers that start off and end up kind of hitting big, so to speak?
um Well, yeah, I mean, I'd say a big one is Alexandra Fasulo, who we have actually worked with a few times already. She got started on Fiverr as a copywriter a few years ago, and now she's kind of known as the Fiverr millionaire because she made in the millions on Fiverr. Now she works with clients outside of that. She's an influencer. She has, I think, nearly 1 million followers on TikTok. More than 100,000 on Instagram. And I mean, the amount that she charges certainly reflects on her making a lot of money, even for
Yeah.
this. So I'd say that's a very inspiring story. That's something which you can look up. You can find lots of kind of articles, interviews with her. So that's a very inspiring story. But I'd say like on a personal note. And there are many similarities between entrepreneurship and freelancing. And I'd say for me, what I found amazing about freelancing is like in some ways it can be more stressful, but ultimately you're always in control. Like you can just sit there and not reach out to any new clients and then not have any client work next month, or you can be super proactive and then make 3 times as much next month as you did this month. And with a 9 to 5 job, you have that safety blanket, but you could work 3 times as hard and still make the same as you do, kind of doing the bare minimum. So I don't know. For me personally, stress. I'm not saying stress is something that I like, but there are things that are worse. And for example, boredom and not being in control for me are much worse than being stressed. So if you're like that, then I think either freelancing or entrepreneurship could be a very good fit.
Yeah. So then, what would be in your mind like the difference? 'Cause somebody once told me, this really good guy who's a freelancer, and he himself views himself as a freelancer, but not an entrepreneur. I found that to be kind of interesting. So, do you feel like there's a difference between a freelancer and an entrepreneur? And if so, what is it?
I'd say no, not inherently. I mean, but I'd say the main thing I would point to as being different is an entrepreneur probably typically has a bigger ambition. So a freelancer wants to work by themselves, maybe subcontract some things out, but basically work for themselves and just kind of do that as a lifestyle. Whereas I think an entrepreneur typically will maybe start like that, but then want to kind of have a lot larger ambition and then start working with a lot more people, sort of form a company, um, that kind of thing. But I think inherently they're the same thing. I would say that freelancers are absolutely entrepreneurs. I would call them entrepreneurs.
Yeah, same. And that's why I was kind of going back and forth on it. I think the only thing is like, again, it's like what I have found to be true is the freelancers that call themselves freelancers versus entrepreneurs is just the mindset of it. Like to your point, like if I'm a freelancer and look, I have no intention of hiring other people. All I want to make is X amount of dollars a month so I can get by, do what I got to do. I just want the freedom to do whatever I want. Cool, like you're a freelancer, and that's like the mentality. Versus like if you're a freelancer and you're like, yo, I'm doing this, Carl, for like 2 years to get like figure out what makes sense, whatever, and then I'm gonna hire out so that way I can do more projects, and I'm gonna scale it, and I'm gonna have an agency. Then after I have the agency, then I'm gonna figure out how I can do coaching, and like there's like a natural progression to it, right? And I think that's the mind of that because I'm like you, right? Like as soon as I start to work on one thing, like you mentioned something earlier, like you would suck in the corporate America. Well, I was good, but basically my boss at the time my corporate job figured out that they needed to give me they needed to not just give me a raise, but they needed to promote me every year. Because if they didn't, they knew they were going to lose me. And I asked him why after, because he mentioned this to me, whatever. Because every year for 3 years I got promoted until I, finally got to where I was at. And he's like, because you get bored. Like after not even a year, like 6 months, I'm getting itchy. I'm like, I need more responsibility. I need more people to manage. I need more and more and more. Like it wasn't even about the money. To your point, I just was getting bored. Like I got this part down. Like let's go, come on. And so quickly, he kind of said to me after the fact, like I knew that you, we met up after I started my company and stuff. And he goes, I knew you would never last in the industry, and it's not a bad thing. He just said it's because once you got to that level, because like for everybody in my lane, the end result was VP of sales.
Mm-hmm.
But he goes, I knew if you got there, you'd be there for a year, and then you would hate your life, and you would end up, burning out anyway, because like you're so bored. And so it makes total sense that like, sometimes in the corporate world, I mean, we think that's the progression, and then once I get there, manager, VP, whatever that thing, and director of ops, then I'll be happy. The truth is, like that's why entrepreneurship works for people like me and you, is because like there's a new problem to solve every day.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like there's always something, and especially with you, like with my stuff, it's pretty low key. Like again, we have the agency. I didn't need to raise funds for that. I just reached out to people and said, "Hey, do you want to make some money running a podcast?" And they're like, "Yeah." Like that's literally it. It's not that hard. With you though, like you raised funds. You're meeting with like investors. Like that's crazy. But again, my point is, you still got tons of new problems. So like the chance of you getting bored is pretty much slim to none, I would imagine.
Yes, I mean I'm never bored at work, which is really fantastic because for so long, at school, university, I was always bored out of my mind. So I mean that's one of the greatest things about my job. I do such a wide spectrum of different things, and I also like, for example, with raising investment, it's not something that I ever learned. I kind of just it was a necessity at one point, because I thought I wanted to run this full time from graduating, so I needed to raise some money. So then I, spoke to people who had raised money, and kind of got started there to learn. But it's not something that I kind of learned at school or university, or that anyone in my family has done this before or anything like that. I didn't have like great connections starting out. I think I have some great connections now, but all of them came from, just making the, kind of reaching out to people and speaking to people I found interesting. So, yeah, I think the important thing is just to take things one issue at a time, focus on an end goal, and then figure out how to get there step by step.
What is your team mostly all remote right now, or do you have people like in an office somewhere?
No, we're all remote at the moment.
Do you feel like you'll always have it be that way, or do you want to go to hybrid? Like, what's kind of the vision for what you think, the employees and stuff like that's going to look like for your company?
I would like to go to hybrid eventually. I'd say, I would like for that to be an office to kind of meet up in person. I'd also quite like it, to kind of go to the office rather than just working from home. Um, but that being said, I would never kind of like force everyone to come in or only hire people that are in the local
Yeah,
area. I think that would just be a complete waste.
dude, you're better than me. I can't stand this remote work. I can't deal with it. Like, I can't stand it. My goal, and I told the whole team knows this. It's not a secret, but like in a couple of years, like we're gonna have a place here, and I live in Phoenix, Arizona, and again, it's not gonna be mandatory that everyone has to come in, but like either fly in every other month to do something because you do lose. There's something you lose, and I don't necessarily know what exactly it is, but like, and also too, it's like, listen, people told me otherwise, whatever. But I think about all the things that need to get done with what we do, right? The graphic design, the copywriting, all that stuff, and how long it takes us to get something done. Sometimes it can take days to like get something finalized and rolled out. And I'm like, if we were all together, this is like back in the corporate days, right? This is where the corporate side comes out. I know we can get that done in 4 hours.
Hmm.
So like if we were all in person. And so that's the frustrating thing for someone like me, that I know that past world because I used to run a team of people, and I would go, all right, get in this room. We're not leaving until it gets done. And it would get done. Right. So anyway, for me, you're better than me because I'm like, I want to, we'll do hybrid. But even if we brought it in on person, again, Carl, I'm not saying that you need to be in there 8 hours. 4 hours, I think, would be good. Come in 4 hours, work, like don't dilly dally, let's work, and then leave, go home, do whatever you want. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. I mean, there are huge advantages to working together in person. We kind of every few months we meet up as a team, and every time I think, oh, we need to do this more often. Like it's always there's always
Yeah.
it's around doing a brainstorming activity. Like the last one we did in December, and we kind of did a SWOT analysis on the company, which was really interesting. It's not something that I actually ever did before. One of my investors suggested we try it. Um, but everyone kind of independently came up with their own ideas, and it was so interesting to see the an amount of overlap of people identifying the same things, which is fantastic. But I mean, nonetheless, coming back to it, absolutely, I think you don't need to be in person for everything, but there are some things where being in person just makes the situation so much better. I think especially around teamwork, any kind of brainstorming activity, and then just if you haven't done it recently, it's good every couple of months to have an in-person meetup as well.
So one of the last things I wanted to ask you about was one of my favorite books is called Vivid Vision. I don't know if you've ever read it. It's by Cameron Harold.
I haven't,
Vivid
but
Vision. He was the CEO of. Yeah, check it out. It's and the reason why is because I think as a CEO, one of and again, I don't want to speak for you, but like for me, the hardest part of it being a CEO is having a vision in your head, and your team doesn't understand or see the vision, right? And so anyway, he came up with this book called Vivid Vision, which helps you kind of write out the vivid vision. Anyway, my point of bringing that up is because I was curious, where do you see this going in the next like 5 years? And maybe don't even put a timeline on it, but like I would love to hear your vision for like how big will the company be? What will you be doing? Like what would change? Like paint me that vision.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's a big space. It's a growing industry. I mean, even now, I think of the total kind of global freelancing market, the freelance platforms it's only about 15% of that, but it is growing faster than the overall industry is growing. There are there are three publicly traded companies in this space. Two of them have a multi-billion-dollar market cap, Fiverr and Upwork. So it's a very big space, and it's growing. And I would like to change the space for the better. So my goal with Revalancer is to bring the freelance space into the 21st century and allow people to communicate freely, to not pay massive amounts of commission fees. So, whether that is kind of, in a few years' time, we become a dominant player in the market, whether that's we make enough noise and get acquired by one of the big players and they adopt our kind of strategies more. Um, or whether it's our large competitors copy us and then kind of do the same thing. We'd then pivot into providing something else, but still we would have had an impact on changing this industry for the better, and that's ultimately what drives me. I'm not, personally, I'm not driven by money at all. Really, I just want enough to kind of get by, but I am very much driven by having a large impact, and on the lives of lots of different people, and in this case, the kind of lives of freelancers is what I'm very much focused on and driven by improving. So yeah, ultimately, just want to change this industry for the better by trying to come up with a much better and updated model.
I think that's a great purpose. And I think the other part of it too would be, I would imagine it's really nice to hear from other freelancers that use your platform to go, man, like actually, I was working at X, Y, and Z company, barely getting by. Now I'm actually making the same amount of money, if not more, and I'm happy. I'm free. Like I'm sure coinciding with changing the way people, use these platforms, it's also probably a part of that purpose to like give freedom really to these freelancers, I would imagine.
Yes, I mean it is quite rewarding, and I think if it wasn't, I mean, I do want the company to grow, absolutely. In that sense, I'm very kind of competitive and ambitious with it. But ultimately, it's nice to also be doing something good. We're not sort of coming in trying to figure out how can we charge an even larger commission fee or something like that. We are doing
Yeah.
something that is making money and will continue to make money on a large scale. But it's also actually trying to improve the industry a little bit too. So that I find that quite appealing, and it's got that kind of dual purpose.
Do you mind if I give you an idea? I pitch you an idea.
Please do.
So I think that'd be really cool because I'm obsessed with stories, right? Which I think obviously most humans are. Do you guys have a podcast?
We actually did a while ago, but we ended up closing it down. I think it was a year and a half ago at this point.
Okay, well, Carl, you need to boot that bad boy back up. But you're going to be on YouTube and regular podcasts. But the angle would be, I would want you to bring on freelancers on the podcast to talk about their journey. Right? You're going to pick the best of the best, the ones that. And here it's twofold, right? So the people that you bring on, you're going to talk about their stories. How do they get started as a freelancer? The whole nine, right? Like where are they at now versus, where were they? And then the people that listen to that will be new freelancers. There'll be people that either A, want to hire a freelancer, or B, wants to become one. The cool part though is that like you then build this community within, your company and give a voice to people that are using the platform, if that makes sense. So I think if you did that, and literally all you have to do is like, that's 52 a year, right, Carl? So like you can put something out in your newsletter or something like that saying, hey, like, are you interested in coming to talk about the podcast and your journey about being a freelancer? Be 30 minutes long, nothing crazy. But then those are your case studies now, right? Like that's your social proof. And the best part is it doesn't have to be around just a company. I would make it around freelancing as a community. Like, what does it take to be a freelancer? How do you use social media to get more clients? Like all these things, because you're not bound like Fiverr and them is based on I make money from the commission. If you can inspire people to become freelancers and they listen to your podcast, the obvious choice for the platform they're going to use is going to be yours. So I would listen to that podcast. So I think you should start off the podcast again.
I think that's a fantastic idea. I mean, what we had before was a lot more generic, just interviews with random kind of business owners and freelancers, and it never really took off. But also, we've kind of figured it didn't really have any impact on the company's KPIs that we cared about. But no, I think that's a fantastic idea, and I'll share that with our marketing team, and we'll see what we can do.
The other thing I would say is, do you work with like major companies that need to like, okay, so for example, if you talk about KPIs, go and get a guest that's a high level person, another CEO, for example, at a company that could hire more freelancers. And then you can do a huge deal with them, right? So then there's a direct KPI that you can go after. So those would be your really big contracts that you can do with major companies, and those are the guests that come on there. The best part is it gives you better, and this is for your sales and marketing team, is that the best thing ever about this strategy is they're more likely to open that email and say yes to it than a pitch. Like,
That's
because
true.
all you're doing is saying, hey, do you want to come talk about how great you are? Hell yeah, I want to talk about how great you know what I mean? So anyway, take that and use that. Anyway, any final things you want to throw out there before we jump on here? This has been fun.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say, to anyone who's looking to start a business or to kind of go into freelancing, I'd say go for it, and just remember that the most important thing is persistence. It's so cliche, but I really think that it cannot be said enough, because I've been at points throughout my journey where, I was working very long hours, making close to $0 an hour, kind of thinking, will this ever change? But you'll be surprised, because sometimes, you need to do 80% of the work and go 20% of the way, and then the final 20% will get you 80% of the way. Obviously, that's not my original idea, but it's very, very much true. So, yeah, I'd say that's something I want to throw out there.
No, that's awesome, man. Well, look, I'm really big fan of what you're doing. I think one, it is going to change the industry. One, you're definitely helping the freelancers out. And look, I'm really big on anybody that wants to create personal and financial freedom for themselves. So keep doing what you're doing. If you need anything along the way, please let me know. I'll help any way that I can. And this has been fun, Karl. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to The Elevated Entrepreneur. If you want to check out more about the guest, look at the description below. And as always, if you're a beginner coach or even someone that's seasoned and you're looking to join a community of like-minded individuals, learn about branding, lead generation, sales, you name it, think about applying to the Elevated Coaches Academy. You can learn more about that in the description below. I look forward to having you in the next episode, and we'll talk to you soon. Stay motivated, stay elevated.